Welcome, everyone, to the Council of Trent podcast. I'm your host, Catholic Answers apologist and speaker, Trent Horn. I am with Dr. Liz Jackson, professor of philosophy.
Yeah, assistant professor of philosophy
at Ryerson University in Toronto. Now, I figured it's philosophy because you have a specialty in epistemology, how we know what we know, right?
Yep, exactly. So my dissertation actually kind of focused on belief and like rational belief, but then I'm also really interested in knowledge, and most people think rational belief is a part of knowledge. So so all of that stuff I'm really interested in, and then kind of applying that to philosophy of religion as well.
Well, I'm super excited because we're here also recording live at the Capturing Christianity conference. So you're a speaker at the conference, I'm one of the speakers, and it's just fun to meet other people, especially professors who are interested in providing sound reasons for Christian belief, because there's not a lot of them out there, but it's nice to meet them.
Yeah, it's actually kind of interesting within philosophy as a whole. I think it's less than 20% that are theists. But then when you look at the philosophers of religion, I think like 70+% are theists. So, there's different proposed explanations for the data. Some people say, oh, it's because once you're an expert on it, you realize that God exists.
Right.
But other people say, well, you were already a theist, and that's what got you more interested in philosophy of religion. So, people debate about that. But,
right.
Yeah.
But so what we're going to talk about today is I wanted to talk about an argument for the existence of God. I'll put argument in quotation marks because it's not so much an argument, but it's one people have heard a lot, and that would be Pascal's wager.
Yep.
And so it's more of a pragmatic justification for belief in God that a lot of people get wrong.
Yeah.
They don't understand. So I wanted you to talk about it because the idea here is, should your atheist friend bet on believing in God? And a lot of people think that the wager, based on the French mathematician Blaise Pascal, they think the wager goes like this. Well, if you believe in God and let's say you believe in God and there is a God, you go to heaven, and if you're wrong, you won't know otherwise. But if you don't believe in God and you're wrong, you won't know. If you don't believe in God and it turns out there is no God, you won't know. But if you don't believe in God and it turns out there is a God, you'll be burning for all eternity. So if you do your probability calculus, you should bet on God for heaven to avoid hell, is how a lot of people think of the wager, that this is about the most probabilistic way to escape hell is to believe in God. But that's not really the wager, is it?
Yeah, at least that's not the way that
That's not the way Pascal puts it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's like two ways you can look at the wager, right? So one is a more historical lens. You can kind of try to understand Pascal in context. I think that's a super important and valuable project. And another project that might overlap but is slightly different is, what's the most plausible version of this argument we can make, whether or not that was what Pascal said?
Okay.
And so I'm interested in both of those. One thing to note about Pascal historically is that Pascal really thought he had given arguments to really make it so that there's only two live possibilities. Either Christianity's true or atheism's true. And those are about roughly 50-50. And so if you're in that situation, that's where Pascal brings the wager in. So a lot of people...
this is important. A lot of people think, I should just go to my atheist friend and give him Pascal's wager, and that's the end of the day. But it's more like, it's like the cherry on the sundae. It's like, look, I gave you all these arguments, and let's say you're not a hardened atheist, but you're someone who's like just sitting on the fence. Like, I really, really don't know. It could be Christianity, it could be atheism, I'm right on the fence. You're saying, at least the way Pascal would have envisioned it, the wager is good for someone who is sitting right on the fence.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't think Pascal took his audience to be someone who's 99.99% sure atheism is true and basically thinks all religions are, garbage or something. So,
right.
So that was not his audience. I think it's interesting to think about ways we could get stronger versions of the wager for people that assign Christianity lower probabilities. And so I'm interested in that project as well, but I definitely think putting Pascal in context is super important. Another thing to note about Pascal is that a lot of people will bring up this many gods objection. Which religion should we pick, right?
People will say, okay, believe in God, and it's a safer bet than not believing in God. And a lot of atheists, I see a lot of atheist videos online that critique Pascal's wager, saying, okay, which God do I believe in? If I pick the wrong one, he might be really mad I worship the wrong God, so like the wager doesn't even work.
Yeah, and that's another reason I think the historical project has value, because the whole you have to read the wager in context again. And Pascal had argued to the point where the only two live options were Christianity and atheism. So I think for someone in that situation where they really are just taking one religion seriously, the many gods objection just doesn't crop up, right? So we can ask a further question, which is, what about someone who's, undecided between religions? What if they're taking several different religions seriously, or lots of different religions really seriously? And some of my work, I do sort of try to address that question, because I don't think everyone's in a situation where they think either this one religion is true or atheism is true. Yeah.
Well, let's talk then about the modern project of taking, because this is what we do a lot with arguments in any field, but especially in the philosophy of religion. You might have an argument how Clarke might have done the cosmological argument, or even atheists will take David Hume and say, well, this is what Hume said, but it's kind of rough around the edges. Let's make it even better. Yeah. So what would your modern project or view of the wager be in contrast to Pascal?
Yeah. So in our project, we actually don't start with arguments for Christianity. I think you can do that. I think that's cool. I'm not opposed to that. But in the project, that sort of the version of the wager that I propose, what we start off with is we say, look, it seems like there's some kind of asymmetry between theism and atheism. It seems like theism, belief in God, has these benefits that disbelief in God or atheism
by
doesn't
asymmetry,
have.
do you mean there is a difference in the benefits between being a theist or being an atheist?
Or something like that. There's something, so, and we like to put it in a pause, like, I think yes, but I want to say it in this way.
Sure.
Like when you initially introduced the wager, you were focusing a lot about someone that sort of comes into the wager because of a fear of hell, you know? And I like to think about it more like this. Someone who says, look, I don't believe that God exists. I don't even think it's very probable that God exists. But what if there was a God? What if there was an all-powerful, all-loving being that created everything and wants to have a relationship with me? Seems like someone that's worth pursuing. That seems like, a really important thing.
Right.
And so I'm going to take a risk and maybe give up some of the goods, like sleeping in on Sunday, or maybe, some of the 10% extra money that I'm going to tithe or whatever. I'm going to give up some of these goods in order to pursue that relationship with God because of how good that would be. Right. So that's a benefit in a way, but it's focusing on the benefit of this relationship with God rather than, I think a lot of people like to say, oh, isn't Pascal's wager just selfish? But I think when you put in that light, you can kind of see.
Well, it's about self-interest.
Yes.
There's nothing wrong with self-interest. That's how we live life. We do think we always act in ways that are in our interest. And one of the things that is in our interest is to grow in virtue, to care for others within the human community. So is one way to look at your modern understanding of the wager is that even if an atheist thinks there is a low probability that God exists, even a very low probability, because there is such a high amount of utility involved in believing in God, that just makes it worthwhile because it's approaching essentially infinite utility. Maybe not in this life, but it's so highly valuable, it's worth pursuing, even if the probability is quite low.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of sort of the intuition that we push. And then I think the other element of it, kind of going back to this question about what do we say about the many gods and the fact that there are various religions, since our wager doesn't involve these arguments for Christianity, we actually try to give you a mechanism that you can use to choose between various religions.
Okay.
And one of the most important factors that's going to come into play is probability. So if you're saying, do I want a 90% chance at some infinite good or a 10% chance at infinite good? Clearly, you should take the 90% chance. In the same way, if you think Christianity gives you a 70% chance at some good and then Islam gives you a 10% chance at that good, then you should go for Christianity. So we say, look, wager in the religion, that's most likely to be true. That's as far as we go with Pascal's wager. But then you can kind of build on to that and give an argument that raises the probability of Christianity.
I think this is helpful because sometimes atheists will say, well, what? I don't even have any idea. All of these, they'll pick up a book. I think there was someone, I want to say his name actually was Michael Jordan. Someone looked this up for me if I was wrong. But it was something called the Encyclopedia of Gods. And so I want to say, I think it was written not by the basketball player, or the actor. I'm going to look it up. I think it was written by, I think that's the guy's name, is why it sticks in my head. And it's like 4,000 deities. And it's like, what are the odds we're going to get this deity right? But that seems silly to me. That'd be like saying if I went to a murder trial And I'm saying, well, why should I think the prosecution got the right guy? The odds of them, it's 1 in 6 billion chance. It's like, well, no, it's not.
like that.
It's not equally, in a murder trial, it's not equally probable every human being that exists. Much like every deity that is out there, there are different levels of evidences.
Absolutely.
For there really are.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, it's interesting. I was here at the conference, so tomorrow from this recording, I'm going to be debating Ben Watkins from Real Atheology. And it's interesting, when I spoke with them, they were saying, like, we've engaged Muslim apologetics, and they've said it's just embarrassing to try to engage Muslim apologetics because it has not been tested anywhere near to the level Christian apologetics have.
Yeah.
I mean, especially since the time of David Hume, for the past 200 years, defenses of Christianity. I mean, well, I would say even for 2,000 years, some Greek critics, Muslim critics, but especially in the modern project, it has been systematically analyzed, tested. You need a robust Christian theism to survive in academia today, things like that. But other religions have not accomplished that same project.
Yeah.
Without, I would say, abandoning just the Western view of logic in general, to have something that's just completely esoteric, that's beyond criticism because it doesn't care about criticism. I don't know if that, I was rambling there a little, if that makes sense to you.
No, I think that's really good. So I think, so epistemologists call it the principle of indifference in what you're talking about, where we just give each religion equal probability. But you apply that when you don't have evidence about which one's the most likely. You know what I mean? So totally agree. And yeah, I think there's a very valuable project, which is looking at the evidence for various religions. And I would agree with your assessment. I think there's quite a bit of pretty compelling evidence for Christianity. And I think you can take, what's cool about the wager is you can take the wager and you can combine it with that evidence. But it takes a little bit of a pressure off of that evidence too. You don't have to prove that Christianity is 99% likely or something. If you can prove that it's more probable than the other religions, then you throw Pascal's wager in and you should commit to Christianity.
And what's interesting there is it doesn't even have to rise above 50%, the preponderance of evidence to belief. It just has to be more probable than any other belief system. Because here's interesting. People might say, oh, well, I'm only going to believe in something if I get even. Some people might say it's irrational. At first, it seems right. It's irrational to believe something that has less than a 51% probability of being true. Like, you would think, okay, I'm only going to believe in things that are more likely true than false. But that doesn't, and you're the epistemologist, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but in some cases, all of the live options we have might be less than 50% probability.
I love it.
And so then, by that logic, well, I guess I can't believe anything.
Yeah.
Well, that would be silly. And this will probably come up in the debate that I'll have with Ben, because I've been looking at Paul Draper's arguments for the intrinsic probability of theism, that he says it's less than atheism.
Yeah.
But I would say the intrinsic probability, whether something is true, and then the negation of it, the probability it's true intrinsically is going to be less than the negation. It'll go back to like the murder trial example. The probability that Jones killed Smith versus anything else killed Smith is going to be less, but that's true for any proposed explanation.
Yeah.
So I think that if all of the different explanations could be less than even 50%, when you compare them, and for me especially, Christianity, like, it has like the miracle claims and the historical evidence you just don't find in any other major religion. Yeah. So as an epistemologist, you would say that we have to look at all the evidence before we make these decisions. Yeah,
there's actually a famous case. So epistemologists debate about what's the threshold for belief. Is it 50? Is it 1? Is it 75? Is there no threshold?
Right.
Well, there's a famous case, and it fits perfectly with what you're saying. You're at a horse race, and there's 3 horses. Horse number 1 is 46% likely to win. Horse number 2 is 30-something, and horse number 3 is like 30 or 20-something. Make it add up to 100 or whatever.
Right, yeah.
And it's like, look.
So it'd be 46, 30, and 24.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect. And so it's like, look, let's say you believe that the 46% chance, let's say that's horse A, you believe horse A is going to win. It's not at all clear that that's irrational. It's the most likely of your live
Most
options.
people would say that is the most rational horse to pick in the race. It's more rational than saying none of them will win.
Right. One of them is clearly going to win. And so, I find this case pretty compelling. And you might have situations where you shouldn't believe the most likely of the live options. You don't have to commit to a general principle.
Right, sure.
But in that case, that seems perfectly rational.
And I think
to me.
it's also important when we're comparing probability and we're choosing how to live out our life and what beliefs there are. I think atheism must be considered one of them, not some kind of default position or some kind of null position. It is one of the options that should be weighed on its merits. Otherwise, it's unfair to leave it out of the boxing ring.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, and this goes back to one of my biggest pet peeves about YouTube, where people try to say atheism is a lack of belief. And there's so many problems with that, but that totally flies in the face of the way that epistemologists think about belief in general, which is that for every proposition, you can believe it, you can withhold belief on it, or you can disbelieve it. And for theism, that's you can be a theist, you can be an agnostic, or you can be an atheist. So atheism is disbelief that God exists.
Yeah, it is denial. When people say, I don't know, I've heard this old saw so many times, it's just a lack of belief. I don't have a burden of proof. My rejoinder sometimes when I'm cheeky is, well, then it's boring.
Yeah.
Your atheism is boring, and it's nothing for me to consider in my life, because the things that I'm willing to expend brain power on are the things that tell me the way the world is. Yep. And if your atheism is only a description of your psychological makeup, what you do or don't believe in, who cares?
Yeah.
I want to know the way the world is, and it sounds like your atheism can't tell me very much about that. But then if you say, well, no, what they're saying really is they lack belief in God because they make a claim about the world. There are no good reasons to believe in God. But now when you say something about the world, you got the burden of proof, my friend.
Mm-hmm.
So,
which is that there's no good reasons to believe in God.
Right, exactly. So great. Well, and one last one, I want to see what you think of this, that sometimes when you're picking the different religions, some people say, oh, what if I pick the wrong one, the wrong hell problem again? It seems to me that a lot of religions, maybe leaving Islam off the table, if you live an authentically Christian life, that's essentially what these other belief systems or religions would tell you to do anyways.
Yeah.
Altruistic, practicing mercy, virtues, the Beatitudes, that if you were to live an authentically Christian life, that's really the same thing the other religions would tell you to do anyway, so you're not really missing out on anything.
Yeah, no, that's great. So this is actually the response I give to this objection that I call the Homer Simpson objection, because Homer goes, what if every time we're going to church we pick the wrong God, and so every time we go to church we just make God matter and matter and matter.
Right. Yeah.
And I think this is actually a really nice response, which is that religions prescribe many of the same actions: going to religious services, participating in religious community, tithing, helping the poor, doing demonstrating certain kinds of virtues, right? And so I think practicing a religion is at least getting you closer on the path, you know?
And of course, I'm not saying religions don't matter. We're not talking indifferentism. The point is, going back to that person on the fence, the person who is on the fence should not be worried about offending God if they attempt to live out what seems to be the most probable explanation of God's existence or the Christian faith.
And relatedly is the problematic thought that being an atheist is somehow like neutral or something. And it's like, no, you have your own gods that you worship. You have your own things that you idolize. Even if it's not a religion in particular, I think many atheists are just living for something else, So I don't see atheism as this neutral, kind of like what we were saying earlier. And then, the religions are the ones taking stances.
Right.
No, we're all living for something,
Right.
So.
Well, where can people learn more about your work, research and interests on the wager, religious epistemology? Where can people learn more about that?
Yeah, so I have a website, which is liz-jackson.com. And I guess sort of two things to highlight there quickly. I have a page that's called Research, and if you're more interested in some academic articles, a bunch of stuff there you can download. And I think most of my work is available for free download there. And then I also have a page called Public Philosophy, where I have a link to my YouTube channel, and I also have a link to a playlist of other YouTube videos that I've done on other people's channels as well. So that's a little bit more if you don't want to dive into an academic article, but maybe listen to some podcasts or YouTube channels. I have some blog posts on there too. So Public Philosophy page is where you can kind of find all that, and then find my YouTube channel as well.
All right. Well, Liz, thank you so much for being on Council of Trent podcast, and I'm excited for your talk at the conference.
Yeah, me too. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you guys so much for listening. Be sure to go to TrentHornPodcast.com to support what we're doing here, and hope you guys have a blessed day. Hey, thanks for watching this video. If you want to help us produce more great content like this, be sure to click subscribe and go to TrentHornPodcast.com to become a premium subscriber. You'll help us create more videos like this and get access to bonus content and sneak peeks of our upcoming projects.